Hey there, welcome to the channel. This is Caffeinicus, and today's World of Warships video will feature a game in the Riga, the Tier 9 Tech Tree Soviet heavy cruiser. This is a Tier 9 maximum game on islands of ice. My team spawned south and I'm headed east to help out with the sea cap. As always, let's start with the strengths and weaknesses of the ship as we're moving into position. The Riga has the highest HP pool of all the Tier 9 Tech Tree cruisers at 50.5k HP once fully upgraded. In addition to this, the Riga is also extremely tanky for a cruiser, with a 35mm deck and 40mm icebreaker extending all the way to the bow. You do have a thinner 25mm nose and stern plating, but bow tanking in the Riga makes it a very tough cruiser to dislodge. You do have to watch out for carriers when you are bow tanking though. Your AA is decent, but you are no anti-aircraft monster like the Neptune, so try to stick with friendly ships to maximize defense against planes when a carrier is in play. The 33.5 knots base maximum speed is okay for a heavy cruiser, but watch out for the typical Russian maneuverability, with a turning circle of 920 meters and rudder shift time of 11.5 seconds. The Riga's concealment is terrible at 12.1 kilometers with Captain Skills mod and camo. However, it is more than enough to deal with enemy destroyers, as you have a 12-kilometer range radar, meaning if you're spotted out in the open when not firing, simply turn on your radar and scare the pants off any enemy destroyers in your vicinity. With the radar mod and consumables enhancement, you can get your radar duration to almost 20 seconds, which gives you enough time to aim and fire a couple of salvos at any pesky ships you may find. But finally, let's talk about the guns, which is what makes and breaks the ship. The Riga has 9 220mm guns in 3 triple turrets in the AXY configuration. The base range on these guns is 18 kilometers with the upgraded FCS, which means you can use the reload mod to bump up your DPM instead of the range mod. The guns feel extremely accurate at close to mid ranges and have excellent muzzle velocity, meaning it's comfortable to use even against fast moving targets. The AP shells are great, with a maximum damage of 5750 per shell, tied with the Drake and second only to the Rune. In addition, the penetration capacity on these shells are simply fantastic, and the high-tier Russian heavy cruiser line also gets a slightly improved ricochet angle, meaning that you'll wreck the broadside of any enemy target you find. The HE shells, on the other hand, are rather mediocre for its gun caliber, with only 30-50 max damage and a 14% chance to cause fires. They do have 37mm of armor penetration, so that is a consolation if you are facing bow-on ships. On the downside, however, the Riga has super slow turret traverse for a cruiser, which is made worse if you're using main battery mod 3 to improve your reload. And speaking of reload, the DPM on the Riga is quite poor due to its slow reload of 12.3 seconds even with MBM3. So I found it difficult to get really high total damage games in the ship unless you are able to get into positions to fire on broadside targets and use the Riga's amazing AP penetration to good effect. Speaking of broadside targets, hello Amalfi! That tier 8 cruiser gets the full Riga experience here at 10 kilometers as I put 20,000 damage into him with just my front guns. My second salvo is rather disappointing unfortunately. I hit all 6 shells, but only 6k damage. I should be able to sink him before he gets behind the island. I fire, but the North Carolina eats my snacks. Well fine, that's one less enemy cruiser to worry about. So now I'm going to try to reverse and see if I can get shots off on that St. Louis I was dueling earlier in this game. There are a few tall islands here though, which makes it more difficult to use the Riga's guns effectively. And that's the downside of having such great shell velocity. While the flat arcs makes leading targets much easier, you can't hide your ship and fire over island cover the same way a USN cruiser can, for example. Instead, what I find myself doing most of the time is parking beside an island and using it to cover my broadside, either port or starboard depending on the map or position. That way, I can angle the ship against everyone else and use its great armor profile to tank shells. As you can see, I wasn't able to get shots on the St. Louis, so let's push out the other side of the island instead. I switched to HE as I know the Kitakaze is still around, and I also have to be careful to angle once I get past the edge of the island as there is a Synop close by who could ruin my day. I got spotted while not firing, so I turned on my radar and spotted that pesky destroyer. We immediately take a big chunk out of the Kitakaze, hitting 8 of our shells for over 5k damage. We also angle away from the Synop and fire our second salvo, but only 2k this time. The Kitakaze grounds himself and activates his smokescreen, but we have his position locked. We fire, but now the Cleveland grabs that snack right out of my mouth and eats it. I'm a bit disappointed. The 2 targets I should have killed in this game were sunk by my team because my reload just wasn't quick enough. Anyway, the torpedo threat on this flank is now over, so I'm going to turn my ship around and see if I can put some shells into the enemy Synop that's parked in the sea cap. Our Georgia is heading out on the eastern side of the island, so I'm thinking that the Synop will probably be pointing his guns that way. We'll use the speed of the Riga to try to get back into a position to fire on that enemy battleship. At the same time though, I'm also looking around to make sure that I don't expose myself to a crossfire from the enemy ships. There is a Kansas to my west, and the Pommern is still somewhere up north. Pushing too much further to the north here will put me in between a rock and a hard place. Looks like the Synop has also started charging into our Georgia, meaning that the island is completely blocking my line of fire. And that's when the Helena comes into view. Don't get me wrong, the Helena is a good ship at tier 7 with 15 guns that can put out a lot of hurt. However, against the Riga, it really isn't a fair fight, especially if he has to turn to show broadside in order to avoid torpedoes. I am still worried about giving my side to the Pommern to the north though, so I'm a bit distracted, and I keep glancing around to see if that Pommern is paying attention to my juicy flank. My second salvo takes off 10,000 damage from the Helena, and he eats a torpedo from our friendly destroyer. And finally, with our third salvo, we're able to take out the Helena for our first kill in the game. It looks like the island at C9 is blocking the Pommern's line of fire, so at this point I decide to angle against the enemy Kansas instead. The Kansas is another ship with a whole lot of firepower, but with a slow reload. Actually, it's slow everything. Anyway, we turn our ship and angle to engage this American behemoth. Our first salvo does a whole lot of nothing. Let's just call it a ranging shot, shall we? Our second salvo does a lot better. Even though the Kansas was angled, we managed to put in over 5,000 damage into his superstructure. We're finally getting the range now and making life miserable for this poor tier 8 battleship. And as you can see in this engagement, the penetration on the Riga's AP shells is really nothing to scoff at. The Kansas is paying attention to me now, but I'm already angled in towards him. What concerns me more is the Pommern, who has reversed past the edge of the island at C9 and can now take shots at me, so I've got to get forward as quickly as I can and use this iceberg to my right in order to block off his shots. And that's fine with the Riga. At close ranges like these, you have over 400mm of armor penetration with your AP shells, so theoretically, I believe you can actually citadel ships like the Kansas. Not that I do, of course. Those of you who've been following this channel for a bit should know that my aim is highly suspect. But we do take out that enemy battleship with some help from our little friends. With the Kansas out of the picture, we're now free to engage the Dmitry Donskoy, the Russian Tier 9 light cruiser. And this is worth highlighting as it gives you an idea of the differences between the two ships as you proceed up the tech tree. The Donskoy is the faster ship, with better DPM and also access to torpedoes for those hairy in-close moments. On the other hand, the Riga is the slower, heavier Bruiser that can take hits and dish them out. To win a one-on-one fight against the Donskoy, the Riga really has to catch it broadside and maul the Donskoy with its amazing AP shells. The Donskoy, on the other hand, will win if it can angle and use its DPM to burn out the Riga. In this case, I caught the Donskoy right as he was trying to extricate himself from an island, so even though he had a 6k HP advantage over me at the start of this engagement, I'm actually in the better position. I am pushing in towards the Donskoy though, meaning I can only use my frontal turrets. On the other hand, the Donskoy has continued to sail broadside in order to bring all his guns to bear against me. And what do we know about the Riga's AP? Well, it wrecks broadside cruisers like there's no tomorrow. I've only gotten a couple of citadels on the Donskoy so far, but we've done a ton of penetration damage on him. So, despite our DPM and the initial HP disadvantage, we were quickly able to cut down our light cruiser counterpart, while taking only some light damage in return, most of which we can recover with the use of the repair party consumable. Of course, as is the case with this game so far, we take the enemy down to practically no HP, and then our snacks get eaten by our team. Oh well, that's life, right? Anyway, hopefully that engagement showcased the differences in the capabilities of these two ships. Things definitely would have gone worse for me if the Donskoy had started angling against me, as it would have reduced the effectiveness of my AP shells. And if I was forced into a bow-in fight using only HE, I think the Riga would have come out the loser. Alternatively, if the engagement happened at extremely close ranges, where the Donskoy could bring its torpedoes into play, then things could also get really dicey. But in this case, I'm pretty happy with the way things turned out. Well, at this point, there is only a very healthy Pommern left to deal with. He is on the edge of the map though, so I've got to kick my ship into gear to get into range. The 18-kilometer range on the Riga is sufficient in most regards, and this might be the only time I've ever wished I had the range mod mounted. But nah, how often do you even have to worry about 20-kilometer fights in the ship anyway? Those usually only happen at the very beginning of a game, or at the end, when the results are already set in stone, as is the case here. We finally get into firing range, so now it's time to pepper the Pommern with my AP shells. He slowed down, so my first salvo lands ahead of him. He is also angled against me, so my second salvo does little more than scratch up his superstructure. As a result, I decide to switch to HE. The Pommern is taking a whole lot of fire, but with my last salvo, we are finally able to grab the stack from somebody else to end the game. So, let's take a look at the post-game results. We did over 137,000 damage in this game, landing 7 Citadel hits and receiving the Confederate achievement. Our base XP was 2256, which was top of our team. We managed to damage a total of 9 enemy ships, sinking 3. And you can also see the accuracy of the guns here. We hit over 50% of our shells in this game, with most of our damage coming from AP. We didn't tank too much though, only 1.1 million potential, but we were also never in any real danger of losing our ship either, despite taking almost 40,000 total damage in this game. Also, for anyone interested, here are the equipment and captain skills I use for the ship. Main armaments mod 1, surveillance radar mod 1, aiming systems, rudder shift, concealment, and main battery mod 3. You could switch out aiming systems for improved turret traverse with main battery mod 2, but I just prefer the improved accuracy. For captain skills, I have grease the gears, priority target, consumable enhancement, superintendent, adrenaline rush, heavy AP, and concealment expertise. So, the Riga in a nutshell. It's a good ship, but it does have its limitations. The ship can effectively tank enemy shells when sitting bow in due to its great armor profile. However, it's also less effective against bow in enemies due to the poor DPM and mediocre HE shells. I've found it difficult to get those super high damage games in this ship, as I feel that if you want those type of games, you really have to get yourself into positions where you can use your great guns, in a sense similar to what I tried to do here. It makes me think of the Henri IV playstyle when it first came out, push a flank and then sweep in towards the middle. In other words, you don't have to get pigeonholed into bow tanking in the ship just because it's something the ship is good at. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe and like buttons below, as it helps me grow the channel. and please join me again next week for more World of Warships videos. Thank you for watching and take care.